Last night, I got after the Lions went and beat the Seahawks. That was right full of Michigan guys, which I kind of felt bad about that. I decided to watch Devin Gardner and Sam Webb on the Monday Morning Quarterback, only to find out that they are basically saying the same thing I said yesterday. And right before recording this, I look at a little bit of the comments, which is on our own show here, Locked On Wolverines, and only to see that people are still being very undude. I want to address a couple of the misconceptions that are out there because there's still a lot of them. And I think that it's time that we address it. Is this team perfect? No. Is this team going to bludgeon every team in its path? Well, it hasn't done it yet this year. But we need to talk about where this team is on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And we are going to discuss a little bit of what I consider the misconceptions, because I don't want to say I was surprised. I was not surprised. I was just like, I want to hear what Devin Gardner has to say. This is only like the fourth time I've ever watched Monday Morning Quarterback. I watched it last week after we had our initial reaction after USC. And I watched it a couple times after one of the Ohio State wins, whether it was 21, 22, or 23. I don't remember. But Devin basically said all of the same stuff that I said, just with way more nuance than what I said it. Because, I mean, obviously he can do that where I can't. So I was a little bit surprised. No, I shouldn't say surprised, but not surprised, but also just kind of like, come on, people. As I look at the comments on the last episode, and we're gonna actually address some of these directly. This is something that we've not done. We're probably never gonna do this again. But I just wanted to see, is my point getting home? Because I understand what Michigan's trying to do. I understand what I'm looking at, and it seems like some haven't been. First thing I'm going to talk about is defense, just to get it out of the way, because I've seen multiple people really upset with Zeke Berry and what he's done. I don't see the issue that you're seeing. It's the secondary. A good offense is going to get a good defense a lot. We've kind of gotten accustomed the last few years of that not being the case. More often than not, good offense is going to get good defense. Watch the Georgia-Alabama game. Both really good defenses. Both defenses got. Right? That's just kind of how it happens. Look at Ohio State last year. That defense got against Michigan. Michigan, its defense got against TCU. You're going to get got every now and again. Zeke Berry is the least of your problems. There's multiple people that are complaining about him. If you're complaining because he gave up a touchdown, I mean, that was the touchdown that was thrown in the perfect location. He couldn't get to it. He was in perfect coverage. There's going to be moments where guys miss out. Obviously, you look at the USC game and there was the blitz. That's clearly just miscommunication. I highly doubt Wink Martindale called a blitz in that situation from the deep safety. But those are the types of kinks that get ironed out. This is one of the weird things that I've seen Michigan fans do, is just like, this guy isn't working, get him out of here. Now, how do you feel about Jair Hill the last 2 weeks compared to the first 3 weeks? Because the first 3 weeks, it was kind of like Jair Hill, get him out of here. And then he improves, and now you're like, maybe once Will's back, you've got two elite corners, right? So it's kind of interesting when it comes to that type of thing. I do like some of the comments that understand that, like, we aren't, because here's the thing. I'm not sitting here being like sunshine and rainbows, everything's amazing, but understand what you're looking at, because everything isn't necessarily amazing. It's a work in progress, and you have to understand that it's a work in progress, and you can't just upend the work in progress unless you want to start over, which is what Michigan has already done. And that's going to stymie what you've already done. So at Michigan Hype 45-46, I've seen enough in the first half to understand this team's potential, and it looks promising. If Michigan can figure out how to play fundamental football for all four quarters and continues to improve game per game, I think they can. I'm even optimistic about beating Ohio State. If Michigan can get home with 4, execute the bend, but don't break D, especially in the secondary, coupled with successfully running the ball, I see us being very similar to the 2021 game where C.J. Stroud threw for 394 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't see Michigan scoring 42 points, but I can see us scoring 27 to 35 if the above came true. He continues, But like, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, can you get there by the end of the year? Now, there might be some losses along the way, because even with this kind of rebuild that Michigan's under, right? Like, I understand we were really optimistic that things weren't going to go this way. I thought, like, okay, you got all these new offensive linemen, but they've been sitting behind the other guys. They've been in practice. They know what it takes. They're going to be able to plug and play. It turns out that it was just too much. And you don't have a quarterback that can sit there and go out and kind of make up for a lot of the issues. Because like we talked about yesterday, the pass game battery, there's times when Orgy's doing the right thing, but the offensive line doesn't. There's time when the Orgy and the offensive line do the right thing and the wide receiver doesn't. There's time when the wide receiver and the offensive line do the right thing and Orgy doesn't. There's times where all three have failed too. So it's just about getting to be consistent and doing it in real time. And like I said to Anthony Broom after the press conference yesterday, I might have said this on the show yesterday, I don't remember. But this is the type of team where I would not be surprised if they beat Oregon and then go the next week and lose at Indiana. That's kind of what we're dealing with. But you can see the pieces here. So Rican Raider, who's a normal podcast, he's part of the Victor's Valiant. He says, as long as they win, I don't care how they do it. That should be your mentality instead of looking at every game as a harbinger of what's to come, because it really just kind of doesn't work with a team that's building as Michigan is. And it's been good enough to go 4-1 despite all of this. One of the comments was like, I'm getting big 2020 vibes. Well, you shouldn't be, because they beat 4 teams, including ranked USC, who's currently ranked number 11 in the country. That's not 2020. 2020, they went out and beat Minnesota team that was really just kind of messing around. Wasn't very good at all. This USC team is at least pretty good. And then they basically lost to every team but other than Rutgers. Teams had a little bit of the cipher of Don Brown and it was his play calls mixed with the fact that you knew how to attack. If you knew where the blitz was coming from, you knew where to go away from it. That was kind of like the missing link to all of that to some degree. But there's so many people that are saying things like, I see a lot of plays where we hand off and the running back runs up the middle into a wall and it looks like the left side is wide open. You have to understand what you're looking at. Some of these things aren't being blocked all linear. It's not just like, let's run an inside zone and the inside zone fails. Oh, okay. A lot of it is if you go back and watch the replay, you see a guy that is supposed to have that key block and misses it, doesn't stay on it long enough. There've been times where they've run to the outside and that hasn't worked either. And it's a large part because you've got 10 guys doing their job and the 11th not. And it just so happens that one guy who doesn't stay on the block, hold the block, get to the block is the guy who ends up allowing the tackle to happen. I urge you to, if you're watching the game, go back and look at it as, why did that play work or why did that play fail? And you can kind of see, and you can look and you see all these different guys engaged. And then the one guy who's not engaged is the guy that the defender rolls by and ends up getting that tackle 3 yards into a run. But if he gets that tackle, you look at what's ahead of him. You see nothing but green grass. That's happened all year long. But with Orgy, you've got a lot more options, and you see a lot of things that are opened up because of him. The Kalel Mullings long runs opened up because of him. Let's continue along these lines of thought. Let's continue to look at a little bit of what you're saying. We're debunking people. Why not? We're going to get to all of the rest here in just a moment. But before we do, it's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. This week we selected Jair Hill, and the reason why is because he has just been ascending and ascending and ascending. He's so much better than he was beforehand. So the interception was a clear part of like, okay, this guy's figuring it out. He knows how to get downfield, how to make these types of plays. He's snuffed out the closest plays, the running plays. He's just been electric and a heck of a lot better. So I'm giving Jair Hill $100 on Roy. If you were impressed as we were with his performance on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy, throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just $10, it adds up fast. So now you have the chance to show appreciation for the emergence of Jair Hill in a standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to bring to the program. So get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. All right, let's continue on. Just somewhat, and I'm not debunking because I hate. I debunk because I love. And again, I'm not saying this is 100% going to work out, but you can see things. Like Devin said the same thing that I said. Yeah, I watched this after the Lions game. I know I have no way of proving that to be like, see, you can look at my timestamps or anything like that. But he said the same thing I said, which is you can look at where Alex Orji was against USC versus where it was against Minnesota. And it's you can see tangible progress beyond throwing for 80 something yards instead of 32. But that obviously it doesn't mean that this is a finished product. This was just his second start. He never had more than like 4 plays in a row at the college level until last week. So you have to keep this in mind. Like this is going to continue to be a work in progress. And Devin said, not me, but he said like Washington, despite how good their pass defense is, gives a really good chance because they don't really do a lot of disguises. So he can kind of see what he's looking at and go with it. There's just going to be a lot that's going to be going for him here. Let's see. I just want to continue to find a couple little things here. I agree with this. Look, Kirk is new at play calling and will have his ups and downs, but there's no excuse for him calling a passing play when we need to burn clock. He needs to teach Orji to hike the ball with less than 5 seconds and wasting the clock. That falls on Campbell. The small details mean everything. See, that's the type of criticism I can get behind. That's also like how I felt against USC when they threw inexplicably on that third down play when you needed 2 yards, or maybe it was second down. But you needed a couple yards. Running's your bread and butter. You have so many that you can get in. You're burning clock. That's the type of thing that gets you in trouble. You see that kind of all the time with teams. It's like, oh, now you've given them time, right? You want to make sure that you're being smart about that, especially if your bread and butter is running the ball. Come up with a more creative game play call. That's one of the things where I see a lot of comments on Twitter, here on YouTube, all these things, where I see a lot of people criticizing Kirk Campbell. And I mean, I'm not against it, because the first couple weeks I was like, what are you doing, man? You know, I was the first person to jump on here and say, what are you doing, man? Like, it is unclear that you understand what you need to do versus what you should do, or what you are doing, all of that. Kirk Campbell seemed like he was trying to be too smart for his own good, and I felt like it was the smartest man in the room syndrome. That's changed over the last couple of weeks. That doesn't mean that every play call is perfect. You're never going to have a perfectly play called game. And that, like we're talking about here, is evidence of that. But he's been a lot more creative. Some of the motions, some of the misdirections, and some of these things that they've used have been very good. Now, I think that this team is lacking a lot of the details, which is unfortunate. But that doesn't mean that you give up like whole cloth here. There's a lot of people that are like, you need to broom the coaching staff. My guys, it's week 5 of a team that has to restart. This team still, despite all of these other teams on the schedule being a lot better than you think, like we didn't go into the season thinking, yeah, ranked Illinois and ranked Indiana on top of ranked USC, top ranked Texas, ranked Oregon, ranked Ohio State. No one was looking at things in that manner, right? But you still can emerge with a winning record at the very least, despite that, despite the fact that you're rebuilding. I mean, they were able to beat what's now, I think, number 11, maybe it's 12, USC, despite having a hand tied behind its back, despite not having Colston Loveland. That is a clinic in coaching, is finding a way, especially with a lot of players that don't have a lot of experience, because you have to remember, you get better at football by playing football. A lot of these guys have not played football, and that's why you see a Jair Hill go from being completely lost against Texas to being locked down against USC. That's why you see him suddenly making plays on the ball against Minnesota, is because you get better at football by playing football. Now, they have been banged up. I would, obviously that Minnesota game turned on a dime. It could have gone the other way. You would have, and people still wouldn't have been happy because the offense didn't look that great. But I think that you're going to see some of these things starting to click. And part of that is because of the style of play that Michigan has. This is generally how this has gone. Usually it isn't until week 6 until the offense starts to click outside of the run game. I'm talking about the pass game. I think about how did 2015 go? 2015, everyone was a lot more patient because you're coming off a 5-7 season. Jim Harbaugh's at the helm. You feel confident. You feel comfortable. Jake Rudock, people like to wax poetic about what Jake Rudock was. Well, he hadn't even really connected on the long ball until it was like 8 weeks into the season. And then suddenly they start finding ways to do that. Wilton Speight the next year, he was a lot more efficient in a lot of ways, had some better games early, kind of a little bit more surprising in that light, but still hadn't connected on that deep, long pass until Rutgers, which again was in October. And then it was like, oh, so that is in their arsenal. And they were able to do it a little bit more. People didn't think that J.J. McCarthy, I mean, he had hit the deep ball against Hawaii in his first start, but then you really kind of didn't see it for the rest of the year until the Ohio State game. It was a little bit more dink and dunk. It takes a little time for the passing game in this style of offense to kind of get going anyway. They're not getting full amount of help here, right? Like you don't have a lot of trusted receivers and people that you can really lean on, and that's kind of disappointing. But there's still a lot that can work out. All right, my battery is starting to die because I am not good at planning, but we do need to keep this a little bit shorter than usual and move on. So we are going to do that. I want to kind of tell you what I think this season will look like if all kind of works out and goes to plan. We will do that here in just a moment. But before we do, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're wondering how is it that I don't know my battery's dying on my camera, well, it's because it goes from full battery to half battery to no battery like that. It doesn't go like, oh, you've got 1 bar. It just goes 2 bars to flashing red. But like I said, we are going to keep this a little bit shorter than usual. And anyway, that was kind of the plan. So where do I think Michigan can go from here? What does this look like if it all works out right? Because I can sit there and I can criticize the people who are naysayers, and they might end up being right in the end if the pieces don't eventually click. If this continues to just kind of be this hodgepodge, 10 guys doing what they're supposed to do, 1 guy not, then at some point you're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, well, that just they never figured it out. And that is certainly an option on the table. I'm not saying that it's not. What I am saying, though, is that these guys can improve, and I think will improve. We saw some offensive line improvement, particularly in the run game through the first 4 weeks. We saw some offensive linemen in pass protection initially into week 3 to some degree. It was very minute, but it wasn't big, but it was there. And then they kind of had to change it because the style of offense changed dramatically. It really did. And you have to understand that it changed dramatically. Not saying that all the plays are completely different, but the style of play and what Michigan wants to do and how it's doing it is just much different. And some of the play calls are much different than what we have seen to this point. And stylistically, it's just different because you have a lot more read option. And obviously, you are limiting the passing game. And it was by design against USC. They open it up a little bit more the next week. You open it up a little bit more this next week. So ideally, you see Michigan go to Washington and you see Alex Orchie throw more along the lines of 120 to 150 yards. It's still not burning the house down. It's not really going to set anyone's hair on fire, but he tripled his production from week 4 to week 5. You want to see him about double it, going from around double it from week 5 to week 6. And pick up a little bit more of the slack, have a little bit more of the downfield passing while still using a little bit of the horizontal. I still cannot believe or understand how the offense has not found a way to do more horizontal passing that works, because it just seems like anytime I see any other team do it, and NFL, college doesn't really matter. It seems like they find ways to make that work and make that happen. For whatever reason, Michigan cannot seem to do that. But I think that you also should see, and this is another point that we made. I made it on Twitter on Saturday. Devin Gardner and Sam Webb made it on the Monday Morning Quarterback as well yesterday. Need more designed runs, somewhere 5 to 7. And when I say designed runs, I'm not talking read option. Straight Alex Orji, you are keeping the ball, and here's where your blocking is. Go find it, get it, and go through it. It worked really well for Alabama against Georgia, and it always seems to work when you have a running quarterback because it's like, okay, they're just going to have somewhere, they're just going to run it, and you have an extra man. And, he seems like he's able to kind of he's starting to see things a little bit better on the field. And if he gets to a point, thankfully and hopefully, where he's able to look at it, what's across from him, and he's got a designed run, he has the power to audible out of that into something like, okay, they're really stacking the box. We're not going to have that extra man really. Technically it's going to be 11 on 11. They recognize what we're doing. I recognize what they're trying to do. This is the perfect opportunity to check into a pass and go over the top. I think that you'll start to see more of that recognition. Even against Minnesota, you started seeing by the end of the game, he was going through his progressions. He wasn't doing that against USC. And he started to do that a little bit more towards the end of the Minnesota game. Protection allowed him to some degree, and he managed to do that. We talked about that yesterday. So I think that you can continue to see that kind of grow. It's exactly what I've been saying for the last 2 weeks. Jalen Milroe of today was not Jalen Milroe, same Jalen Milroe last year. That Jalen Milroe this time last year was a guy that still didn't really have a firm grasp on his starting job. The Jalen Milroe the year beforehand at this time was a twinkle of his coach's eye, was barely anything. I again want to say I don't think that Alex Orji is going to turn into what Jalen Milroe is now. He might, though. You don't know. But you need to give him the time to develop. No more of this, well, maybe they should switch to Tuttle. You don't want to keep switching the style of offense that you're playing over and over again. That is not going to give you a good chance to win. I think that the best case scenario is that they just continue to develop Orji in season. That's exactly what Alabama did with Jalen Milroe last year. And hope that you continue to see progress. He's going to have good games. He's going to have bad games. There's going to be games where you're going to sit there and you're going to curse everything that Michigan football is, because right now you are not operating with JJ McCarthy at the helm. Heck, even some of you did after Bowling Green, after Purdue, after Maryland last year in a year that they won the national championship. So you go through game by game. Now defensively, they do need to figure out how to handle second halves. They're a bad second half team. It's something we are not accustomed to. You are more accustomed to seeing teams find ways to come back. Look at Alabama and Georgia last week. Alabama dominated the first half. Georgia came back and took a lead. And then Alabama found a way to close it out. So let every game be self-contained. Let them figure things out. This is a very young team. There's a reason why they are 128th in returning production. Out of all of the teams in college football, 134 of them, they were 128th. I thought that there was enough continuity where they weren't going to have to worry about it, and I was wrong there. Mea culpa. But they have all of what you need to kind of be able to traverse the rest of the schedule. They might end up 9-3. They might end up 6-6. Hopefully not 6-6. That would only mean 2 more wins. They could end up 11-1. You don't really know. At this time last year, no one thought Alabama was going to get through the schedule unscathed the rest of the way, and they did. This is the same Alabama team that barely beat USF. And it wasn't like, okay, next game, Jalen Milroe caught fire. That wasn't how that went. They cobbled together each individual game and found a way to win, sometimes inexplicably like they did against Auburn, and found themselves against Georgia and beat Georgia. Michigan has a lot of talent on this team. At some positions more so than others. In some ways, like we've seen Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart and Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, sometimes they can will the team to a win. They might need that some weeks, especially on the road like they're going to right now. So just take every game as it goes. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be some downs. When I say there's ups and downs, that means there's going to be some downs. And trust me, what you just experienced have not been downs. They have been wins, and that's not a down. There might be some downs. Like I said, don't be surprised if they beat Oregon and lose to Indiana. But take that type of idea with you. Don't be surprised if they beat Oregon, but also don't be surprised if they lose to Indiana. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. We'll be back on Wednesday to discuss what Kirk Campbell had to say in his press conference, get a little more clarity on the state of the offense, and we will go on from there. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.